Chivalry offers the only possible escape from a world divided between wolves who do not understand and sheep who cannot defend the things which make life desirable. Arguably, in our world, sheep are much more represented, those people who understand but cannot defend. And this reminds me somehow of the words by Peter Thiel that brilliant thinking is rare, but courage is an even shorter supply than genius. Now, according to C.S. Lewis, it is not beneficial to be either. Not beneficial to be the sheep and also not to be the wolf. Rather, we should strive, according to C.S. Lewis, at the ideal of chivalry. And why is that? And what even is that ideal? This we will find out now. The important thing about this ideal is the double demand it makes on human nature. The knight is a man of blood and iron, a man familiar with the sight of smashed faces and the racked stumps of lopped off limbs. He is also a daimyo, almost a maiden-like guest in hall, a gentle, modest, unobtrusive man. And this double demand is the core of chivalry. A man who is able to go to war and is able to defend, and simultaneously who is gentle in peace and can have valuable conversations and know how to behave. And this doesn't mean that the idea of chivalry is like a middle point of those two parts, so to speak. It's not about like being 50% able to defend and 50% able to understand, so that in total we have 100%. No, it means to be able to defend 100% and able to understand 100%. He is not a compromise or happy mean between ferocity and meekness. He is fierce to the end and meek to the end. Naturally, those two characters, so to speak, like the character to be able to defend and the character to be able to understand, are not naturally drifting to each other. Right? They're rather drifting away from each other because they are a little bit opposites. But exactly that's why, according to C.S. Lewis, that the ideal of chivalry, that to combine those both natures or characters, so to speak, is not nature, because it's not natural basically, but it's art. The man who combines both characters, the knight, is a work not of nature but of art. Of that art which has human beings instead of canvas or marble for its medium. The conclusion is that we are not born as a knight, but we can become a knight. And now before we look at how to become a knight, we have to first look at, is it even possible or even necessary in our today's world to strive for this ideal of chivalry? The word, the meekest man, says Sir Ector to the dead Lancelot. The word, the meekest man that ever ate in hall among ladies, and the word, the sternest knight, to they mortal foe that ever put spear in the rest. Lancelot is and was the embodiment of the ideal of chivalry. According to C.S. Lewis, the Middle Ages, because this ideal of chivalry comes from the Middle Ages, shows us how attainable that ideal is. And it shows us that it's not really attainable, because the Middle Ages didn't produce exactly those perfect knights, so to speak, right? Except Lancelot, of course. But even if it's not so attainable, of course, because it's an ideal, right? It's in the definition of an ideal to be not attainable. It is extremely important, according at least to C.S. Lewis, to strive for this ideal, especially in our modern world. It taught humility and forbearance to the great warrior, because everyone knew by experience how much he usually needed that lesson. It demanded valor of the urban and modest man, because everyone knew that he was as likely as not to be a milksop. As I already said in the introduction, many men in our times are most likely sheeps, right? People who understand but not defend. So they fall in the category of a milksop, so to speak. Of course they understand, but they can maybe not defend. And I was thinking about that the internet makes it a little bit even worse, because on the internet we can be anonymous, right? We can just write our opinions under some username, and we can just fight for it. And don't get me wrong, it's good to voice our opinions, right? It's free speech, it's really good. But at the same time, what is our opinion worth when we are not willing to risk some damage to our reputation or name? When we can't stand with our name and reputation behind our opinion, when we are just giving our opinion anonymously, right? So this is always the question. And the internet, by being more anonymous, we can just better fake that we have character, that we have courage, but probably when we stand in front of other people, we would probably not voice our opinion. And then it's really the question, is our opinion then so worth it when we don't want to stand behind our opinion or ideas? Now the essence of striving for this ideal of chivalry, of becoming a knight, so to speak, is this double demand, right? That we try to get better at defending ourselves, but at the same time, of course, also understanding, because it's exactly this double demand, what we now talked about before, what makes us, let's say, becoming more and more this ideal of chivalry. In the last video, we talked about that we need good men to make a good society, because without good men, we don't have a good society, and without a good society, we can't produce, so to speak, good men. Now, we know one way, like one ethical code, the ethical code of chivalry, or the ideal of chivalry, that we can use to become good, right? Like to become good as men. And when we are good, we likely produce a good society as an outcome. Let's think about what happens when we are not becoming good. When our society can't produce good men, what happens then? If we cannot produce Lancelots, humanity falls into two sections. Those who can deal in blood and iron, but cannot be meek in hall, and those who are meek in hall, but useless in battle. For the third class, who are both brutal in peace and cowardly in war, need not here to be discussed. We can argue that in our days, maybe we even built a society where we are just pretty one-sided, right? Like probably we created a lot of sheep, so to speak. Like many of us are just sheep, like really good in understanding, but really bad in defending. So we build already this society. It is not good either to be a wolf or a sheep, right? Wolves without the, let's say, gentle side are way too brutal. And sheeps without the defending side are way too weak. So we need this combination, right? And it's not good to just strive for one. Of course, maybe we are like better in one than in the other, but we also should always try, when we are good to be this wolf, we should try to also develop the sheep side, like to be good in conversation, to have valuable conversations, to develop our scholarly, our intelligence side, so to speak. Let's say, just for the sake of the argument, that we produce a lot of sheep, so we are pretty one-sided. And this, in general, when we have too much sheep and also too much wolves, or only sheep and wolves, right? But that we have no knights, like no one who is both, that can have disastrous consequences, like for our civilization or society, according to C.S. Lewis. When this dissociation of the two halves of Lancelot occurs, history becomes a horrible simple affair. The ancient history of the Near East is like that. Hardy barbarians swarm down from the highlands and obliterate a civilization. Then they become civilized themselves and go soft. Then a new wave of barbarians comes down and obliterates them. Then the cycle begins over again. Modern machinery will not change this cycle. It will only enable the same thing to happen on a larger scale. Those words by C.S. Lewis remind me of some picture which is sometimes reoccurring on social media, which goes like the following. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Another question to you. What do you think when we take now this picture literally, or like this wording literally? In which stage are we? Would be just interesting to know. I don't know if this is even so applicable, but just for the sake of it, maybe you have some opinion about that. Where are we standing at the moment? We said that probably we have more sheep than wolves in our society, but even if we would have more wolves than sheep in our society, I think what C.S. Lewis means, it doesn't matter if this is unbalanced or something, because what matters is that we have enough knights, like those people who are both in our society. Now, we saw what happens when it is not the case, that like societies get destroyed probably. But how can we, in our modern ages, re-establish this ideal or this ethical code of chivalry? In previous centuries, the vestiges of chivalry were kept alive by a specialized class, from whom they spread to other classes partly by imitation and partly by coercion. Now it seems the people must either be chivalrous on their own resources, or else choose between the two remaining alternatives of brutality and softness. So basically, according to C.S. Lewis, is that we have to make it on our own, right? Because we don't have like some specialized classes, like in, at least in the Western world here, like in democracies, we are basically, let's say, now one class, and we lost this, that there is a class and everyone in this class has to act according to an ethical code, which in this case was probably even not so bad, right? Like, in my opinion at least. Because then everyone is holding accountable. Now we don't have any ethical codes, like maybe some universal ones, but not so many, and we don't even know how to judge someone or ourselves even, right? We have to start with ourselves. So we don't have anymore like a class called the Knights, who keep their own members in check, right? And to keep themselves in check, and to have as their goal, as their class goal, that they strive for this ideal of chivalry. I'm planning to make an ethical series where we go through different traditional or classical ethics or moral systems through, like Homeric ethics, Stoic ethics, and so on. Hopefully this brings some value for everyone, that we can maybe choose some ethical system, right, which we can base our life on. If you have some ideas, please always feel free to write me and share your ideas freely. This is it for today's video. When you're interested in more on C.S. Lewis and his ideas, especially his ethical ideas, watch this video, that we need good men for good society. And those topics, those ethical topics, are, I think, pretty important, right? But there's not so much talk about those things. So I appreciate really that you watch this video, and I hope also that you got some value out of it. Thank you again for watching today. And as always, I wish you a great day.